What if the most dangerous weapon in the world wasn't a missile, but an industrial accident? Or maybe even just an idea? That's what we're diving into today. We're going to break down how the very definition of a threat is changing right under our noses. See, it's not just about soldiers and tanks anymore. The dangers we face now are way more subtle, they're woven into our daily lives, and honestly, they're a lot harder to fight. So let me ask you this. What does a modern weapon look like? When you hear that word, what do you picture? For most of us, it's probably something from a movie, right? But the reality is, our classic idea of what a weapon is becoming dangerously out of date. We're all conditioned to think of threats in terms of raw military power. Tanks rolling across a border, fighter jets in the sky, the kind of massive combat operations we see in history books. And look, that kind of threat is still very, very real. But it's only one piece of a much bigger, much more complicated puzzle. Because a modern weapon can also look like this: a catastrophic failure at a chemical plant, something like that fatal batch reactor explosion in Kentucky, can unleash a toxic cloud that poisons a community for decades. It's a weapon of pure disruption, causing chaos and lasting harm without a single shot ever being fired. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful, most insidious weapon of all is simply an idea, a piece of disinformation, carefully crafted and spread to make people doubt the very science and institutions meant to protect them. Because when people lose trust, our entire system of preparedness just starts to crumble from the inside out. So what all this means is that we're dealing with a brand new playbook of chaos. The old lines between wartime and peacetime, accident and attack, information and weapon, they're all blurring together. To really get a grip on this, we need to look at 3 different fronts where these new threats are operating. And here they are. You've got hybrid warfare, which messes with decision-making. You've got information warfare, which targets our trust. And you've got this constant hum of industrial and natural hazards that threaten our health. The scary part? These aren't separate lanes. They all feed into each other to create maximum confusion and damage. All right, first up, hybrid threats. This isn't just about winning a battle anymore. It's about sowing total chaos. A perfect and pretty grim example is how Russian forces in Ukraine have used riot control agents. They're not just trying to disperse crowds. They're using these agents to force Ukrainian soldiers out of their fortified positions and right into the path of gunfire. It's this clever, brutal mix of non-lethal and lethal tactics. And this quote from Polina Gogach just nails it. These are not random acts. As she says, there's a real strategy behind them. They're calculated, coordinated, long-term plans designed to weaken an enemy from the inside by exploiting every possible crock in their society. The second front is the war on information, on science itself. And one of our source articles for this explainer draws a really striking comparison here. On one hand, you have Soviet Lysenkoism, where political ideology basically destroyed an entire field of genetics. On the other, the source points to the Make American Healthier Again, or MAHA movement. The article highlights how politically driven skepticism has resulted in thousands of scientific research projects being paused, sparking real concerns about losing our innovative edge to competitors. And that brings us to the third front, the constant background noise of everyday hazards. These are the daily reminders that we live in a complex, fragile world. We're talking about everything from industrial explosions and wildfires to some truly bizarre stuff, like a swarm of jellyfish shutting down a nuclear reactor's cooling system, or an AI actually giving a man fatally wrong chemical advice. These things are constantly testing our defenses, even when there's no bad guy involved. Okay, so how in the world do you defend against a playbook this complicated? Well, the global community isn't just sitting back and watching. It's actually developing what you could call a global immune response, a whole system of defenses layered at every level to adapt and fight back. At the very top, at the strategic level, the response is all about scale. I mean, just look at this. An exercise like Brave Bedouin, focused on specific skills, involves about 400 people. Now compare that to Defender 25. We're not talking 400 people. We're talking 25,000 personnel, all training for major combat in a contaminated environment. The message here is loud and clear. Large-scale readiness is back in a big way. But it's not all just military might. Down at the operational level, civilian experts are doing the tough job of figuring out where we're weakest. The recent U.S. Hazmat Roundtable found some pretty serious gaps. Our response teams are getting stretched thin as the old guard retires. At the same time, new technologies and threats, everything from fires caused by lithium-ion batteries to the challenges of new small nuclear reactors, are changing the game way faster than we can keep up. And then you get to the tactical level, on the front lines, where this stuff is happening for real. Colonel Vlasyuk from the Ukrainian Armed Forces just lays out the problem perfectly. It's a constant balancing act. You have the immediate, obvious threat of bullets and bombs, but you also have this constant invisible threat of chemical or biological agents. It's incredibly hard to train for both at once, but as he says, it's absolutely necessary. So, how does a big strategic investment or a high-level plan actually turn into something that works on the ground? Well, it's all about connecting the money to the mission. It's about turning that strategic vision into a tactical reality. Look at a number like this, almost $1.2 billion. That's the proposed R&D budget for chemical and biological defense in the U.S. alone. It's a staggering amount of money. But it's not just a number on a spreadsheet. It's the fuel for the kind of innovation that keeps people safe. The real question is, what does that money actually do? Well, it funds experiments just like this one. In Ukraine, they're testing out drones for CBRN recon. Now, you can see it's a pretty slow, manual process right now. You launch the drone, fly it out, take a measurement, fly it all the way back, and then manually check the data. It's not perfect, it's not fast, but it is a hugely important first step in using technology to get critical information without risking a single human life. And all of this brings us to the most important point of all. This isn't a problem we can just solve and walk away from. It's a constant race, a resilience race between the threats that are always evolving and our ability to adapt and respond. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's a race that never really ends. And you know what? Winning this race often comes down to something surprisingly simple: human connection. I love this quote from Brigadier General Chris McKinney. He points out that these long-term partnerships, like the ones between U.S. National Guard units and other countries, are built on decades of real trust. They get hugs when others get handshakes. That's the kind of relationship that becomes one of our most powerful assets. So when you put it all together, you realize there's no magic bullet. There isn't one piece of amazing technology that's going to solve everything. Our ultimate defense is a living, breathing system. It's a mix of smart innovation, those strong international friendships built on trust, and, maybe most importantly, a public that's resilient, informed, and trusts the science. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In an age where the biggest threats have become invisible, shifting from bombs we can see to ideas we can't, then maybe our most powerful defense isn't a weapon we can hold, but the trust and resilience we build together.